Hi, this is the Evolution Lab podcast, and I'm Matt Roberts. This is part of my ongoing mission to keep developing the optimum way to help people reach their goals, overcome adversity, and change perceptions about what's possible to achieve with our bodies. The Evolution Lab is all about being the very best version of you. Please make sure you like, subscribe, and follow the podcast, and make sure you leave a rating and review. It'll help others to find the podcast to share and enjoy too. And now, let's get into the show. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Evolution Lab podcast. My guest today is someone who's got a very unique story to tell. She is a co-author of The Complete Guide to Breast Cancer. She has done numerous numbers of public speaking. She has her own podcast as well. A former consultant oncoplastic surgeon with a doctorate in molecular biology of cancer. Supremely well placed to talk about all the effects that has on the body and illness in general, which we all confront at various points in our lives. Liz, I know, came to exercise maybe a little later than some people, in her 30s, and became a very passionate exerciser, training for triathlons. And I think I'm right in saying she's a huge fan of weight and resistance training. I even think as well as training for a bodybuilding competition. We'll discuss that in more detail. There was a bombshell dropped, however, on Liz when she was 40 years old with the prognosis of a stage 3 breast cancer, which led on to chemotherapy, a mastectomy, a breast reconstruction. Came back 3 years later, and the result of the radiotherapy led her to then have to give up the job that she loved and had done for 20 years as consultant surgeon. So, Liz, there's so much to delve into on your personal story, all things around it. But I would say, of course, that all that sounds in some ways like there's kind of downs and a depressing story in there. But with you, there really isn't. You're someone who is very much more than glass half full. In fact, we even have a term, the jar of joy, we'll discover and talk about as well as your ways of coping with the dark days too. First of all, how are you?
I'm really good today, thanks. It's beautiful sunrise this morning and it stopped raining, so everything's good.
Good, excellent. Yeah, and so context time terms here, we're being hit by a weather bomb in the UK. So there's a whole range of things going on, which is, interesting to watch from outside there. So tell me, look, there's no way to get past the shock that anybody has. And I think that given the state of cancer globally, we all are impacted, whether it's on ourselves or people around us at some point in our lives. At 40 years old, to discover that you are confronting breast cancer and with the knowledge of being a breast cancer surgeon as well, understanding it in detail. Tell me how that experience goes and where you go from there.
It was one hell of a shock. And I think I, like most women, never checked my own breasts. I never thought it would happen to me. When someone got it on EastEnders, I may give them a quick feel, but I didn't think it would happen. And I'd had a couple of breast cysts, which are very common for women in their 30s and 40s as the hormones level change. And I'd had a normal scan the year before. And then I had another cyst on my left breast near the cleavage area. And it was only my mum saying, look, for goodness sake, will you go and get it checked out? Because I'm worried. I thought, okay, fine. And I went to, not in the hospital where I work, but in another hospital, purely because I didn't want my own colleagues talking about me. I wasn't expecting it to be anything. And my mammogram was normal. And then I had an ultrasound. And I looked at the screen, because I do ultrasounds myself, and I saw a cancer. And I think most people, when they're diagnosed with an illness, it's drip-fed. You see a doctor, you have a scan, you have a result, you have surgery, you have a scan. I knew in that split second that because it was big and I was young, I'd need chemo, I'd need a mastectomy. I had a good idea what my 10-year survival rate would be. My husband knew nothing, and it was just too much information to deal with.
Sorry to interrupt, but what's the size of that? So in terms of the scale of that, because that's what people have to understand where you get to stage 3 and 4 and so on, how big?
Most doctors in the UK don't use stages. It's a very American term, but it's based on how big the tumour is. Small is under 2.5 centimetres. Then we go 2.5 to 5, and then over 5 centimetres. And then we take into account the number of lymph nodes that are involved as well. And mine at the end was a stage 3. It was actually 13 centimetres in size, although we didn't know that at the time. Initially, it was 5 centimetres. And I hadn't noticed it, and I'm a breast surgeon. And it had spread to 3 of my lymph nodes during chemo, which is what made it a stage 3. Stage 4 means it's spread beyond the breast, so that's metastatic, advanced, or incurable.
So at that point there, you got that self-diagnosed assessment, and you have a 10-year look at the life expectancy, which is what at that point? What's your averages in these?
And me at the time, it was 60% with chemo and hormonal blocking therapy. Most women, we aim for 95% survival in 10 years. And that's based on 10-year-old data, because you need 10 years of data
Sure.
to give the results. So that is the worst case scenario. And actually, I now realize it's 50-50 because it comes back or it doesn't. But it can be a really slippery slope to start imagining, oh my goodness, what's the point in living anymore?
And this is the thing. This is the point that anybody, it's of course human nature you get to. I think that even with the most optimistic person, you're going to look at the worst case scenarios as well, and think about all the things in and around you and people around you and so on. It's a hugely devastating thing to be confronting. Between that point and then beginning to deal with it, how long did it take to say to yourself, actually, I'm going to give everything I've got to get through this? What was the timeline for that?
I think it was about 2 weeks. So I got to ring my mum and say, I'll be telling you I've got cancer in 4 days. She said, don't be silly. And I knew it was happening. And mentally, I just had to get through it. Part of me was in denial because as a doctor, I've seen the very worst case scenarios. And I couldn't imagine myself as the women I've looked after who haven't lived. But I just had to go through chemo. And it was like, it wasn't happening to me. I think it was harder for my husband to watch me.
Sure.
And I turned to the internet. I told Twitter I had breast cancer because I didn't want people gossiping about me. I'd be recognized because I worked in the hospital. I lost my hair. And it was patients who got in touch saying, you must exercise, you must drink water. This is how you cope. And they literally saved my life.
So it's interesting this because actually it's something that we understand much more now, the effects of exercise, you more than anybody on how this can help get through cancer. The exact data I've got here, there's a Macmillan Cancer Support review done. Research in 2017 showed that there was, from those that did superior levels of exercise, now I'm not quite sure exactly what superior levels would be categorized as, but we're going to assume it's probably 4 or 5 days per week at somewhat high intensity.
Yeah.
This is associated with a 44% reduced risk of dying from the disease. So that alone, a huge drop in your potential for dying, and a 35% lower risk of cancer returning. I mean, these are life-changing odds that you can really shift around. Going into that though, so you discovered exercise when you were in your 30s and you were training hard in those then late 30s. So, what shape were you in? How fit did you feel when you were 39? And what happened in the 12 months after and the 12 months after that?
That's a great question. So I was a cycling widow and I only took up cycling because I realized I'd never see my husband. And within a year, we were doing a Ride 100.
I'm sure you're not alone on that one at all.
Yeah, no. I was terrified on a bike, but I loved it. And I got bored of just cycling. I'd done the London Marathon when I was 30 and I used to swim. So my husband signed me up to do a triathlon when I was 40. He got bored of me reading all the magazines. So I'd done the Olympic distance one at the London docks. And I literally a month before, I'd cycled up the Stelvio twice in Italy, which is a really steep mountain. I'd been up there. I'd done a 100-mile ride the week before, and then I was starting chemo. I was fit. I had no symptoms. I felt amazing. I was in the shape of my life. And I was about to have a treatment that would biologically age me by 10 years. And yeah, I had no idea what I'd be left with as a shell at the end.
So if you fast forward then 12 months through that, then once you've gone through that process, in terms of energy levels, and at the start of that, you're energized, you're amped up, you're ready, you're competing in these amazing events, you're doing things beyond the normal thing that any body tends to actually do in their life. What then do you get to as the lowest point? Because that's clearly going to be a major low.
It was the fear of not knowing how bad chemo would feel. And it was like a combination of the worst hangover of your life and a really bad cold and a really bad stomach bug. It was horrible with horrible pain, imagine really bad DOMS as well. But that would pass after a couple of weeks and I would do park runs and I'd cycle, but I was exhausted and I had to forget all my PBs and forget all my Garmin data and just do it. And by the end of 5 months of chemo, I couldn't walk 100 yards without stopping to spit. And I couldn't walk upstairs without pausing for breath 2 or 3 times. And I was sharing sitting down. Bone-crushing fatigue, and I just felt like a shell of myself. But I walked every day, and I was in the gym doing really low body weight exercises just to stop my muscles wasting away. But my aerobic capacity had dropped completely. And I set myself the challenge of doing a crazy bike sportive called the Maratona, which is done in Italy in the Dolomites. My husband did it the year before, and he said, let's do the short course, which is only about 50K, but it's 2,500 meters of climbing. And it was 3 months after radiotherapy. And I found a women's only cycle camp in Lanzarote and I got fit enough to do it. And my husband dragged me around and we were both crying. And for me, I was suddenly exercising because I loved it. Not because my training plan said I had to do this, and not because I had to be in heart rate zone 3. I was just exercising because I loved it. And then I just set myself challenges. And the year after, I did a half Ironman. But I was slow. I was the second last to finish, but it now didn't matter. It was all about the achievement. Does that make sense?
Entirely. I think it's very hard to put yourself in the shoes of your position on that one, because we all have days where we get out of bed in the morning, and whether it's because there's a weather bomb outside, or whether it's because actually you just had, I don't know, a late night the night before, and we put the exercise off, and we delay, and we think, well, I'll be okay today, it's fine. We go off the program, and it's okay. It's sort of fine. You can get through that. When you're, in some ways, there are two parts to this, I guess. One is when you're really, in a sense, forced to have to do exercise because as a doctor, from the research that you've been doing, that exercise is going to be helping the process, helping you to heal and recover. This. And as well, you need something to grab onto to feel better, to feel good. And the highs that exercise can give you, all those hormone releases it gives you to feel good and feel better. Those two things that are right there, it's a powerful thing to have, but equally, it must also give you this back of the mind thought of, why am I bothering with this? What's the point? And everyone has that bit going on as well at the same time. And I think that it takes a certain degree of necessity to push through something. Now, what you did was did the necessity and discovered, actually, I really quite like this. So I found a new way to try and challenge myself and go beyond the necessity part and actually just really thrive and grow again. And that must be a very big game changer for your mentality and psyche.
It was. And I think exercise gave me a feeling of control. It was something I could do. We know it reduces the side effects of treatment, whether it's chemotherapy or surgery, and that's physical and mental side effects. It's the best thing for fatigue. So I would exercise first thing in the morning, so it was done. And I had a newfound appreciation of my body because it had coped with the ravages of treatment. And I wanted to stay fit and healthy for what was coming. I knew because of the menopausal effects of treatment, my bones were going to start getting weak. So it was really important I had to do it for me. But it's that sense of being Liz and not Liz the surgeon or not Liz the breast cancer patient.
Do you have any idea, is there sort of family history of cancer in your family? There's a
no family history of breast cancer, and only about 5% of breast cancers are hereditary, like the BRCA gene Angelina Jolie had. Most are just because we're women and we're getting older and it's our lifetime exposure to hormones. But we do know that being overweight and binge drinking alcohol can almost double your risk of recurrence.
Well, this is all about those inflammatory markers, isn't it? It's all about how we exist as a system.
And after the menopause, you make estrogen in your fat with an enzyme, and the more fat you have, potentially the more estrogen you can make. So actually losing weight and exercising can reduce your risk of almost every cancer. It's a no-brainer, but no one likes to do it.
This is the thing, though. It's when you look at the reasons why we do something, you have a necessity to do it, of course you do it. But actually, if you look at the reasons behind it, the inflammation story is one that carries weight across all illness. In fact, chatting to Tim Spector recently about the effects of COVID on the body and how the inflammation factor based around things like gut health in particular has had a massive increase in those people who caught COVID and then suffered badly with it, as opposed to with good microbiomes, good gut biology, who then haven't suffered because the inflammation effects are much less. So if we look at lifestyle factors, we actually can make significant changes to how we not just fight away things like cancer, but any other and every other illness without question.
Exactly. And most women with breast cancer die of heart disease. So eating healthy and exercising can reduce the risk of that happening as well.
Is that right? What's the process behind the reason why that happens?
I think it's why most women die. Most women will die of heart disease and strokes. It's not breast cancer. But the healthier you are, if you exercise, you keep the weight down, you delay that happening or you prevent it happening.
Yeah, it's all the question of the intensities. So if we look at the intensities of how you exercised and how we know from research the inflammatory response of exercises that can be positive and negative. So talk me through your exercise regime now, actually. So when you're going through exercise now, what's your current program you do week by week?
We know that the guidelines show that you should do 3 30-minute aerobic sessions a week and 2 half-an-hour weight training sessions a week. And that's to reduce the risk of recurrence by half.
Let's delve into the detail there. So go to the cardio side first. I'm going to grill you on this stuff. So the 3 times of 30 minutes each session, what's the intensity you get to? What's the process of interval training? Is it constant pace training? What happens?
So for me, I use a Sufferfest program on the bike. So it'll do a combination of 1/2 hour to 2 hour sessions because I'm training to climb up mountains in the summer, but I'm out of breath. It should hurt. It should feel uncomfortable. My heart rate zones have gone a bit crazy. My resting heart rate is now kind of 55, which is lower. It used to be 70. And I think chemo can affect your heart, and it's really hard. I tried to train according to heart zones during chemo, and the levels weren't reading. So I now do it old-fashioned way. How out of breath do I think I feel? How hard am I working? And I'm pushing myself. There's no point just plodding.
So a 1 to 10 scale. So if 10 is your exhausted rate and 1 is where you're horizontal.
Between 5 and 7.
Yeah.
I'll do 2 sessions and then I'll have one just to like a base zone 2 or 3, not zone 2 or 3, effort would 2 or 3, just kind of plodding along, keeping the base fitness going. Plus I walk the dog every day. I make sure I get my 10,000 steps. And then I hit the gym. No, I try and do an hour 3 times a week. And that was really important to me because I had a really weak shoulder. I've got no pec muscle on the left because of surgery and I couldn't lift anything. And over a year, I've built up the strength in my shoulders so they're equal and I don't need the physiotherapist anymore and I see my shape change. And I know that's had a huge impact on my health. But it's hard fitting it all in with talks and podcasts and writing and cooking and cleaning. And I have to put it in my diary and make it a priority. Otherwise, it doesn't happen.
But we all have to make sure we mark these things in red in the diary and don't move them because otherwise things just get in the way and then we make excuses for the fact we're not in the health we want to be in.
And I get weeks where I don't do it.
Yeah, of course we do. Everybody does. The intensities themselves. So when you look at that, it's interesting because the data that comes out of research, there's some really good reports from in Portugal by guys Marino and Dea. Their reports showed very clearly that the intensity that's most effective at creating increases in IL-10, the anti-inflammatory response that we get, are high intensity for short durations with long recoveries. So when you're going in there and you're doing your stuff on the bike now, going for that high, and come down a little bit, rest, recover, full recovery, go again. That's a great anti-inflammatory response exercise. Lifting
it's all the hip
heavy
stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. Lifting heavy weights, counterintuitively. Because you think about the idea about lifting heavily, it's this high intensity push, it's this big inflammatory response that we get. You get this huge effort, microtearing of fibers, a release of IL-6, which is this inflammatory response at the point of trauma, interleukin response. And the IL-10 then really goes beyond that response at the high level and actually counters it enormously and brings your inflammation as a whole system way down. So your high intensity work right now you're doing, again, counterintuitively, is the way to try and ensure we get this real reduction in the levels of inflammation in the body, not just for cancer, but for all other illnesses at the same time as well.
And by doing those short, fast intervals, it doesn't take 2 hours. You can do a 20-minute really good cardio workout and you're done.
Get it fitting into the day. The whole boredom factor for many people as well. Cardio training is probably the thing that's last on their list. Trying to do a shorter, sweeter session is definitely better. Interestingly as well, again, at certain points in life as well, the response of people who are doing longer, intensive cardio work. So the person who's doing the longer, higher level half marathons and beyond, the inflammatory response was high during that, but the anti-inflammatory response was low. There's a danger within that of keeping a continuous inflamed response. So this need for someone who's doing long endurance training to take appropriate rest. It's not to say it's bad for you. This is really not the point. The point is how you then use your time in between. So whether you then do this long endurance work, rest, recover, using ice baths, using cold showers. Do you use cold therapy at all?
No, I do not like cold water. I've tried it. And I've tried cold open water swimming and I don't like it. What I think is really important though is I know a lot of athletes who have tried and wanted to carry on training during treatment for cancer, for surgery, for chemo. And we're all type A personalities, the Ironman athletes, the marathoners, they want to run and train and think, I can't take 6 months off. I've got to do my 4-hour run. And actually, your body needs to recover from the surgery, the chemo, the radiotherapy. That is the most important thing. And for me, I think for many athletes, it's remembering this is a chance to almost reset, to do the strength and conditioning work, to use the resistance bands, just to do base level training. So your body is fit and you're ticking along so you can heal. And I found I need 3 or 4 days after a gym session to recover because that wasn't the most important thing in my life now. Your fitness comes back really, really quickly when you get back to it. But it's remembering that the most important thing is recovering from what your doctors are doing to you.
Well, I think it's a key point as well. I mean, obviously, in terms of going through chemotherapy, there's this process of, as you say, aging by 10 years in the process. Some of that comes back as well, of course. Yeah, our telomeres have a knack of regrowing, getting longer again. So hopefully you regain some of those years back and we can live longer. But it's a bit like aging in general. It's where there's not the ability to do something
No,
intensively on a Monday and expect that on Tuesday night you can do intensively again in the same pattern, because you just aren't going to recover in quite the same speed and rate. So part of our aging process
exactly.
anyway is time management, frequency management, intensity and frequency management
Yeah.
all of the time. And cancer just fast forwards and puts that on steroids in a big, big way.
It does. And you have to stop comparing yourself to others. I mean, the woman who,
That's a good
Trish, who
point.
wrote my book with me, she was swimming, 2 or 3K every morning and going on 10K runs, and I'm only doing a 5K walk. And actually, we have different biology and we are reacting differently. We are having different treatment. And it's just stay in your own lane and do what you feel is right for your body.
Entirely. And I guess of one of the things that you learned through, because we all learn things from the darkest moments as well. One of the things you must have learned from going through this whole experience is that exact thing, is really being mindful of how you treat yourself, listening to how the body responds to each day, each moment. How responsive was your body to the foods that you consume and to anything else? Yeah. So can you feel that happening? And during chemo, was that an issue too?
Food was a huge issue. Yeah, so chemotherapy works by destroying cells that are growing quickly. So cancer cells grow more quickly than the rest of your body, so they're destroyed, but it also kills any cell that's dividing, which is basically all your body. So your taste buds get affected and the lining of your mouth. So you get bleeding ulcers and sore gums, but you lose your sense of taste. And with the first drug I had, it was very metallic. And the second drug I had, it was very chalky. So food tastes horrible. And a lot of people snack constantly because they get horrific nausea. So they gain weight because they're just snacking on crackers, trying to stop themselves feeling sick. Whereas I didn't want to eat. And I would lose 3 kilos in water every week. And everything tasted horrible. And my husband had no idea what to cook. And we found a brilliant book, the Royal Marsden Cancer Cookbook, written by professional chefs and dietitians, telling you, if you need to gain weight, put cream and butter in mashed potato. If you need to lose weight, do this. If your things taste metallic, try this, because you want taste. But everything tasted weird. I couldn't drink tea for 6 months because it tasted horrible. And then suddenly when your taste buds come back, I was like, I'm going to be healthy. I'm going to be all green juices and fantastic food. I think, no, I want all the beige carbs because they taste so good now. And you kind of realize you can't live perfectly forever and life goes on. And it's okay to have a glass of wine here and a cake here or there. And actually look after yourself, your body, but don't deprive it of stuff because you've been through chemo. But it was really, really hard.
At the same time as well, with that notion of when someone's unwell, generally, so we know within going through cancer and cancer treatment, the ways in which you confronted that and trying to make sure you're changing your base levels of what you're trying to achieve. When someone's just unwell, someone's been suffering, probably less so with COVID because you have to isolate off and take it very easy and recover. But at what points does someone have to think about adjusting their exercise levels and by how much? If someone's got the common cold or they've got, a bout of flu or they've got whatever it might be, how does someone think about this and what are you listening to?
So I used to tell people it's more important that you exercise for a length of time than a distance. So used to say, start by walking for half an hour every day and see if you can sprint walk between one lamppost and calm down the next, turn around at halfway. And some days you won't be able to go very far. Other days you'll feel better and you'll go on and on and on. But do it by time, not distance. And then you can track yourself and then you learn, okay, I know I'm not having a good day today. Or you'll do a fantastic day and walk for 3 hours and think, I'm going to be really tired the next day. But it's that time and just saying, I'm going to commit to doing this every day. And it doesn't matter how far I get, I've done it. And then you'll notice that fitness pick up.
Yeah, sure. I think that's absolutely right. I think it's a question of really just adjusting around your energy levels in a certain day. Did you actually track when you were going through treatment and beyond your day-to-day levels of energy? Were you tracking it on a 1 to 10 scale? Today is a 10 good day?
Completely. So chemo days, chemo I would have on a Friday, and Saturday morning I would go out and do a park run, which took me about 36 minutes instead of 30. And then the symptoms kicked in Saturday night. And I spent 4 days on the sofa just feeling horrific, crushing bone pain. I couldn't get off the sofa. I felt sick. I didn't want to eat. All I did was walk every morning for half an hour with a neighbor. That was all I could do. I spent the day sleeping, feeling miserable. And then the next Thursday or Friday, you kind of wake up thinking, oh, I feel all right. And then I get out on the bike for a gentle bike ride and I go to the gym and you just suddenly knew I feel good. I can do a bit more. I'm going to push it whilst I can, ready to be hit again. And every time I had a 3-weekly cycle, every cycle it got a bit worse. The pain got a bit worse. I felt more tired. I couldn't do as much in my good weeks. And you just monitor. So this is a bad day. I don't expect too much from myself, but make the best of the days where you do have a bit of energy.
So there are days then when you just avoid it. I mean, there are days when you're going to feel just so low in energy, or when you're going through treatment, that you just think today's not the day to be out doing anything.
Exactly. So some people have chemo weekly, where it's like drinking a bottle of wine instead of 3 bottles of wine, and they have a rough day where they walk, they sleep on the sofa, they're fine. I had it a bigger dose, and literally for those 3 or 4 days, you either get gut-wrenching constipation or diarrhea, your face hurts, your muscles ache, it was a struggle walking the dogs for half an hour every day. I think, right, I've done that. I've earned the right to sleep on the sofa. This is a really powerful drug I'm having. But I know I'm going to get 2 weeks where I can get back in the gym and on the bike and enjoy myself again and make the most of those. There was no point forcing myself to do something on the bad days, because it wouldn't have happened. I'd have fallen over in the shower or done something stupid.
A degree of being realistic. Yeah, you got to be risk over really just what you can really achieve on that day. And there's then a counterproductive point where you're just going to make yourself too exhausted and therefore not able to fight the fight.
And there's a risk you'll get sick, you'll run your immune system down, because infections can kill during chemo. So if you push it too far and you get a load of inflammation in the body, you might actually do yourself more harm than good and end up in hospital.
The effects of all of the medication and treatments, did you have any gut analysis done at that time? Any microbiome analysis?
No, well, I don't think it's commonly done on the NHS. I got really bad constipation. I didn't go for 10 days. A lot of people get really, really bad diarrhea, and I wasn't eating anything. I wouldn't have had the drinks they'd have given me if it had made a difference, because I felt so sick. And but a lot of people do take probiotics now just to reset their gut biome and get themselves healthy again. When you really haven't eaten your normal diet for 6 months, it's a huge change.
Were you conscious trying to make sure you had massive diversity in your diet? It was a case of just literally, I'm just going to eat what I want to eat now, and that was it?
During chemo, I was living off tonic water, crustless white bread sandwiches, bland chicken soup, soba noodles. It was anything I could tolerate just to get a bit of weight, just to get a bit of food into me. Picked up a bit on the good weeks. When everything tastes disgusting, you think, oh, I'll have a beautiful salad, like tomatoes. Oh, they're horrible. They make your mouth bleed. I think it's really hard to eat a good macrobiotic, macro-counted diet during chemo. You almost have to do what you can.
I think more afterwards. So afterwards, when you've come through that process, there's a whole thing where in a perfect scenario, this is the thing, we have these perfect scenarios. I mean, what you'd say is, okay, well, here's the process. We're going to go into chemotherapy, we're going to have this done, that will end. Then the gut will be in this shape. We're going to feed it this and give it the diversity it needs. And then it'll recover, you'll be better. Of course, life's not really like that. It doesn't work in that way. And probiotics are isolating just a few of the microbes you need rather than the whole host and suite of them. So but it's all about really being as aware as you can be and trying to just choose the things that you can, that you're aware of being healthier on. But certainly, I guess we should try to, wherever possible, steer away from things which clearly are the refined sugar end of the spectrum, the high saturated fat end, because again, they cause inflammation by having those foods as well.
You have no idea how chemo is going to affect you, and when you feel permanently sick for 6 months and things you want to eat taste horrible, and you may be a single mum, you may be coping having to cook for the kids, you eat what you can. But I think what you do is say, right, okay, when chemo's done, this is now my chance to think, am I having protein and vegetables, and eat healthily and look after your body. I take anyone to beat themselves up because they can't do it.
Yeah. You pick your moments to be good and not to worry about it.
You get through chemo the best you can because you don't know how you're going to feel. And I take anyone to beat themselves up thinking, I wasn't having my protein shakes or my avocados. You eat what you can. And then when you're through it, you think, right, okay, I'm going to really exercise properly and really eat healthily and rebuild my body fitter and stronger than I was before.
Now, I'm going to guess that I think that the other medic specialists you spoke to at this point in time didn't prescribe exercise to you. It didn't come from the medical community.
No.
It's from other sources instead.
But I didn't prescribe it to my patients. The evidence wasn't there at the time. And I may have had a couple of lectures at uni on how to tell a healthy person to exercise, but let alone a cancer patient who may have lots of other medical problems. And it was other breast cancer patients on Twitter with metastatic cancer who were cycling to the chemo and doing weights, and they inspired me to keep going. And over the last couple of years, the evidence is huge, showing the massive benefit that everyone should be doing it. But doctors are still very wary of prescribing it because we're not health professionals. And if you go to Macmillan or Breast Cancer Now or CRUK, they all say, check with your doctor if it's safe to exercise. And most of us don't know and make it up. We're not sure. And if you don't exercise yourself, you don't get that you're stopping patients getting those endorphins. And actually, it should be the first treatment we offer.
Yeah, it is a massively great area, and for my end of the profession in the kind of the fitness sphere, I have to
Mm.
say it's probably an area which is massively misunderstood or little understood. I think that there's really not enough knowledge over all of the detail over really the ways in which you approach exercise, which we approach diet, rest, recovery, sleep patterns, all the things we can try and make sure that anybody who's a member of a gym, a member of a club, a client can achieve the best of themselves in the most important and dire circumstances. Did you try anything which was intravenous, any sort of intravenous infusions, vitamin C, ozone, those kind of things? Anything which there? No. Would you recommend people to try those things?
No, I'll be honest. I I don't believe in them. I don't think you need them. I think you can get everything you need from just eating a healthy diet and exercising. I think it's a waste of time and money, but that's just my personal belief. I think you eat a healthy diet, you get fresh air. I just don't think you're better off spending your money on a personal trainer who's had the qualifications to teach you how to exercise properly, or getting really nice food than saving on supplements and infusions. I get why people do it. It's that sense of control. They want to do anything they can to feel better. But as a doctor, I don't think there's evidence behind it to prove it makes a difference. As controversial as that may be.
Not at all. No, I think it's absolutely right. I think that the area around intravenous infusions, I think there are circumstances in which they have great places they can exist, but they're very few and far between, and they're very misprescribed based on just either no data dangerously or scant data. I think that there's a real need to understand exactly what the individual might need in more extreme circumstances and look at then their diet to really figure out exactly what's missing, if anything at all, because most diets in the Western world actually, even with a bad diet, is rich in a whole host of vitamins and minerals. Probably a lack of diversity, yes, but we're not lacking in the vitamins and minerals.
I take people to think I'll have a quick infusion, it's an easy way out, I can carry on with a really bad diet and get my fix. Actually, it should be just basic education. This is how you cook a healthy, well-balanced meal. This is what you should be eating.
Yeah, absolutely right. Without question, that's absolutely true. Would you say that then, going back to that point about how the medical profession prescribe exercise, there's a point now to push doctors to not be shy of it and have some sort of more strict liaison between them and the health industry?
So in Scandinavia and Germany and several hospitals in the States, you see your cancer team and you see a physio or a PT who has qualifications in training cancer patients. It is part of your treatment. You are expected to do it. We've just launched, there's been a SafeFit trial for breast cancer patients where they are given a personalised exercise programme, and it's shown a massive difference in their quality of life, their morbidity. The Can Rehab team will now train level 4 PTs to give them that coaching so they can say, yes, you can get in the gym, you can lift hard, and actually encourage people to work properly. There are now places where you actually have chemo whilst you're sat on an exercise bike that reduces the symptoms of the drugs when you get them. And I think
that's a great idea.
Doctors don't have the time. It is, you feel well having chemo. Why don't we have exercise bikes in outpatient clinics? But we don't necessarily have the time. I used to have 10 minutes to tell someone they had cancer.
That's a devastating thought, isn't it? It really is.
It is, because we never knew how many patients we were going to get a week. And if I give everyone an hour, I could be sat twiddling my thumbs. There's so much to go into. We don't have the resources. It's really, really hard. And if you don't know what to say, you might do the wrong thing, but we should all be talking about it at the very least.
So if you were to have your soapbox outside Parliament right now and say, this is what we should be doing to change that, what would it be? I mean, also, there's a great model in Germany working on that basis, but it's the same thing here. Do you think there should be this much stricter way in which we try to make sure people in the health profession are directly trained with certified programs? I'm sure they exist. I haven't even seen them, which is ridiculous.
I think exercise should be the first cancer treatment. We know actually there was a study that got some elderly gentlemen with lung cancer in their 70s, and they got them on an exercise bike working at 60% of VO2 max 3 times a week for the 2 or 3 weeks before their lung cancer surgery. Better recovery, fewer complications, fewer infections. That's just 2 weeks. I think exercise should be the first treatment prescribed for cancer patients. And it should be, you do this, we will treat you, because you have to put your thing in. And then work with councils and gyms so cancer patients can get access to the resources that they need. And let's get the funding so every cancer unit has a physio or a PT that can show patients what they can do. They can take that to the gym. Let's change the notion that cancer patients are frail and can't exercise.
It's a good point. I think every council has its own gym network set up. It's not a case of someone spending a fortune on going to an expensive gym or seeing expensive trainers. This is all about really what resources exist now.
And actually, during lockdown, I transformed my body using a pair of dumbbells and resistance bands when I was training for a photo shoot because the gyms were closed. You don't need to be in a gym, but you need someone to say, yes, you've had cancer, but so what? You've recovered, your scars are healed, you can lift heavy, you can train hard, it is safe, it is good for you. Rather than, oh no, you've had cancer, don't do anything. It's just changing that mindset and making it fun.
Tell me, with that mindset there, tell me about the jar of joy.
So my chemo finished in November, and I had my surgery in December 2015, and I was expecting good news. And I went in, and I remember looking at all the other couples in that waiting room thinking, thank God I'm never going to look like them again, because they were terrified waiting for news, and I was going to get good news. And my surgeon said that although my scans had shown my cancer had disappeared, there was actually 13 centimeters of cancer left in my breast, and it had spread to 3 lymph nodes. And it was the 23rd of December. And I just thought, sod it. What's the point? Cancel Christmas. I don't see the point in carrying on. I now know my survival is much worse. And I was allowed to wallow in misery for a week. And then I was told to pull myself out of it. And I thought, right, I need something to help. And I'd heard about gratitude journals or making a note of 3 things every day, but it just sounded like too much hard work. So I got an old goldfish bowl. It's behind me, actually. And a load of coloured pieces of paper. And every time something good happens, I put it in a jar. And I can see it build up. And it doesn't have to be big. It could be, my husband found a £5 in a pair of trousers he hadn't worn for a year, or the dog sitting on the sofa. And it's not every day.
It's a win.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, it happens. Something, the birds singing, or, you get a car parking space. You don't have to queue for coffee. It just makes me smile. And it's the little things that make a massive difference in changing how I feel on a daily basis.
You strike me as a person who I think prior to all of this sort of being upbeat, positive, and
no,
really, so this has made you more resilient as a human being.
I was a stressed, introverted, pessimistic. If you're given a choice of 2, imagine the worst. That was me. My life as a surgeon had just been 20 years of training, eating, sleeping. I had no hobbies. It had all been medicine because it's such a taxing career. I would join a gym and give them £1,000 and never go. But cancer and retiring and being forced to be at home, working out what I do with my life, just made me realize I'm not just a surgeon, and there are more ways to help people. And by talking about the stuff that no one talks about, it's given me a new purpose. And I'm actually a happier, stronger person now, 6 years on, than I ever was before I was diagnosed.
So very much case that this has given you a sense of life worth living. The life is very much for living.
Yeah, I think you cope when bad things happen to you, and hopefully you come out of it at the other side smiling, thinking, wow, I've been through that. This is now what life should be about. And it's never a gift, but actually it was a wake-up call. I'd hate to have retired at 60, the person I was, thinking, God, what am I going to do with my life?
It's fascinating. It really is. It's something which I think anyone who's listening to this right now who maybe isn't an exerciser would hopefully take some note of the fact that, in any circumstance, there's more joy to be found. I always have this belief that people who are unfit don't exercise, people who are overweight and say they're happy with the way that they are. I think that there's always, whilst part of that might be true, there's always a nagging doubt in their mind, or could be a major doubt they're not letting on. And it's the ability to have a purpose and a reason to move and change. Because getting through all of that and feeling alive and feeling the sense of having purpose is empowering like nothing else. So you're listening to your story, it's really that you are forced into this situation. You had no choice whatsoever. You could have, That's not true. You could have just wilted, but you didn't. You decided to give it a strong direction and push. I think anyone listening to this who is in that state of mind of, I know really back of my, I should be doing it, should take heed and really sort of start to form a plan, start their own jar of joy, start a timeline of events, how to get to where they want to get to, and focus on, really, it's a year, isn't it? I mean, let's face it, these things actually, in any circumstance, cancer aside, when I say to clients about goal setting, we have goals that are going to be, what are you doing day by day? This week, every day, we're going to do these things. What's the goal at the end of month 1? What's the goal at the end of month 3? End of month 12? And this is really, a body is a year of processing, of changing and developing, and recovering from what you've been through is that with bells on.
And I think it's realizing that anything is possible. How you look, how old you are, whether you're big or small, you can do anything. And I say, people listening, if you can doggy paddle and you can ride a push bike with stabilizers and you can walk, you could do a sprint distance triathlon tomorrow and get a medal and start your bling collection. You don't need to be the fattest. You don't need to be the best. And also, if you have had cancer, I know elite athletes that have gone on to race for GB after having chemotherapy because they actually started doing the strength and conditioning work and looking after their body properly and stretching. And It is amazing what the body can do. It really is. You just need to give it a chance.
Yeah, we know that post-COVID, there was this remarkable change in bodies, and there was a huge drop-off in people's strength in their glutes, strength in their lower backs, strengthening their hamstrings. They just sat at their desk or on a sofa watching whatever.
Even before COVID. That was me before
Even before
COVID,
without question, yeah. And the result of it was there's been all of these injuries and ailments coming out. And what's happened with many people, certainly coming back into my clubs, is that you start with the basics. It's rebuild from the core, develop those basic strengths into there, and really make sure we've got that as a base to build from. So your point's right. You can create, great oak trees are grown from acorns. You start with the basics and you make it grow. Good summer bodies are formed in the winter. It's a long process. You've got to keep digging in and going with that.
Exactly. It's all about getting your posture right. And if you're going to lift properly. And again, learning how to switch on the glutes. It took me 6 months to know how to do it. And just rebuilding the basics, as you said, like that foundation's got to be sensible and solid, but it'll last you for life.
So Liz, another thing I'll try and touch on with you as well is you've spoken before about the effects of cancer, chemotherapy treatment on your sex life and sex lives in general, whether loss of libido and things just change. And that, again, is part of this whole thing that's thrown at you at once is devastating too. So talk me through that, how you cope with that, how you change that, what happens?
I had no idea how bad it would be, but it's basically because breast cancer patients who have cancer sensitive to estrogen are given tablets to stop them producing estrogen. And that means they go into an instant menopause. And for the young women diagnosed in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, it happens overnight. It's not the slow, gradual decline over several years that happen. Decline is the wrong word, but the slow process that happens to most women in their 50s. It's bang. And I woke up thinking I'd wet myself, but it was actually a night sweat. There was water trickling down my inner thigh. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is my life. And you don't sleep. The hot flushes, waking up every hour in the night, the corkscrew duvets, all the cartoons that make fun of your granny, and suddenly that's me and I'm 40. And estrogen affects everything. It's a natural lubricant. Your skin gets dry, your hair gets thin. It takes longer to recover from injuries, especially training, because you don't have estrogen, but it also affects your sex life. And this was something I never really talked to patients about. I was never trained how to talk about sex. I used to, your vagina might be a bit dry, but don't worry about it. And then I suddenly realized I had no sex drive because I had no female sex hormones. I had my ovaries out when my cancer came back, so I had nothing. And it was like, I still fancy my husband, but physically nothing happens when I look at him. That was really, really hard to explain that to your partner, to say, I still like you. And it's not you're doing anything wrong. It's just what you're doing doesn't work. And everything can get very dry and tight and sore, but it's not just in your sex life. Women can get cystitis. The lining of the urethra can get dry. And for me as a cyclist, I was getting paper cuts in my labia after half an hour on the saddle. Whereas I could normally ride for 4 or 6 hours. And it was, nobody talks about it. You don't know where to go for help. We now know that vaginal estrogen is completely safe, and that can make a massive difference to it. And it's realizing that sex should be fun. You should be using lubricants. Women can use dilators and vibrators to learn how to masturbate again to orgasm. You can still have sex, but it is very, very different. And it was only by talking to other women who'd been in my position and realizing, there is help available. It's like that cry for help you don't realize you need. Most doctors are very bad at asking about it. And I think we're very bad at asking ourselves. That English, we don't mention sex. I wouldn't talk about it with my wife or my husband, let alone my GP or my surgeon.
Sure.
But it's a basic human need. And again, it's that release of endorphins, that connection that, especially in your 20 and 30, is so hard to think I'm going to live without it.
Well, you have the oxytocin release, there's the endorphin release, there's the other hormone release, so you get a testosterone response.
Yeah.
There's all the whole manner of things to make you feel like you, and it is a human need, and it is underserviced in terms of how we're told how to cope with changes and within that. And for everybody, everyone goes through phases of this in their life, whether it's in their 40s, 50s, 60s, to have it as one big hit. There has to be some sense of understanding where your body's going and what happens next.
Exactly. And you combine that with a change in body image. So you may have lost your breast, or you've got a scar, you've lost your hair. And then the change in metabolism, because many women do put on weight in their tummies after it. So 10-15% body weight gain is very common after the menopause. And you are dealing with all of that, potentially in your 20s, 30s, 40s. It's a huge hit. It's not just dealing with a cancer diagnosis.
Did you find that exercise for you was part of the process of self-concept, this idea of how you do feel about your body, your self-sense of self-worth. It gives you that real kind of ownership of yourself, doesn't it? So within that is a way of feeling more like just being a normal version of yourself again.
Completely. I thrived on challenges. I need a challenge to train, whether it's cycling at mountains or training for bodybuilding competition. It's like, I'm not defined by my illness. And when I exercise, I feel good. So when I feel good, I look good, and I learn to like my body again. I didn't look at it in the mirror after my mastectomy when I was flat because I hated seeing it. But now it's like, wow, this body has done this. It's amazing. Let's keep it going.
Yeah, I think, look, everyone has certain things they confront, and physically we all have different scars that we carry. I think we have to view as being just, they're beauty scars. They're just life things that happen to us or events we have. And hopefully the person with us can be there for us in full and love you for the person for within, of course.
They love us despite them or because of them. And actually, no one's really looking at you. No one really cares what you look like. We're all too busy worrying about ourselves, aren't we?
I think that's true on a basic level of going into a gym. For most people, there's always this concern about going into a gym, for lots of women in particular.
I was terrified about going into the free weight section. And I was going into the free weight section, doing my deadlift, and the men come along and want me to lift the weights. Now I can do them myself, and they're all grunting. And I felt I didn't deserve to be there. They were watching me until I just put my headphones in and thought, right, just do your thing. And I'm actually lifting better than they are because their technique is awful. But it's really scary and really intimidating going into somewhere like that. And I think that's something gyms could work on to make it more approachable, to encourage everybody to use the free weight area.
I think that's absolutely right. I think there's a danger of going down the line of going for female-only gyms, which then takes away the experience of being in a social environment, full stop. The danger, of course, is that, females definitely are, hit on more in gyms, unfortunately, by the gym creeps, and they're there without question.
And the banter, the stuff I've heard men say and talk, and it's like, I feel embarrassed and insulted, and I don't want to say anything because you're bigger than me. Just remembering they're in a public space. Basic.
Yeah. I think the viewpoint is to make sure that you have to remember these people inside of like a sort of a 9-year-old waiting to come out of their body, and you bring it past that. Genuinely. But in most cases, actually you go to a gym space, and your first point is correct, that when someone goes there, you shouldn't feel as though everyone's looking at you, because actually they're so self-obsessed anyway, and in their own little zone and own life issues going on, they're in their own space, and actually you can be in your space. And I know I find going to a gym, even though I clearly love exercise and my entire life is built around it. I like to go into a gym and just find my own space. I put my AirPods in. I've listened to a podcast. Generally, it's not kind of music blasting. It tends to be podcasts I'm listening to with some great scientists and nerds I nerd out on. And that's my way of being in my space. What else is going on in the gym, unless it's in my own gym, I'm not really looking at it. I'm actually focusing on my own time. So you should go into a space and feel like as though you're just comfortable being your own skin without question. So Liz, I know as well, as part of this process, I'm guessing that you suffered from PTSD and depression within this. So again, I guess the joy thing was part of this process, but this is an extreme version of suffering.
Yeah, I didn't realize how much cancer would impact my mental health. And it probably happened about a year later when I got the call for the first mammogram, and you just worry, what if it comes back? What if there's something there? And every time I walk past the breast unit, I'm back there waiting to get bad news. It's kind of the flashbacks, and it's really hard to deal with. But again, for me, exercise was a way of getting myself out there, the jar of joy, just thinking about all the different ways I can help people now and what I've done with my life. But it is hard. I think we need to accept that anyone with a serious illness is going to have mental issues as well, and how we can help them through that.
Yeah, I guess this I've heard described before as being a bit like a bereavement, where the person that you were before and your aspirations of the life itself, they're gone.
I've lost my hair. I have chronic pain. I have scars. I can't use my arm properly. I lost my career. I was made infertile. The grief of the things that you lose is huge, and it all happens overnight. And it can take years to pick through that, and you get triggered. So even now for Christmas, whenever I see all the kids, I think I could never have my own child. And it gets me every time. You just get these little triggers and flashbacks. And that's why, I guess, being self-centered and realizing you're okay. It doesn't define you. You can get through this. Giving yourself a break.
Absolutely. Liz, you're an inspiration. You look incredibly healthy. You work harder than most people do, ever going to the gyms and working out and doing incredible challenges. I wish you all the very best in doing more of those going forwards and all the work that you do alongside. It's been a real pleasure to listen to your story and listen to the advice people on what they should be doing for themselves to try and ensure that we we stay well, and also we don't sink into this idea of being stuck in a kind of well of being unwell and being so down on it. I think in COVID and post-COVID, never been more important time to have that mindset very front and central. So thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure, and I will speak to you, I'm sure, on a podcast at some point in the very near future again.
Thanks, Matt. It's been great to chat.